5 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my sister called to tell me my father had chosen her again. Not with those exact words. Veronica never needed exact words. She knew how to turn a knife and call it a family update. I was standing in the bridal suite of the Alder House, wearing a white satin gown that had taken 6 months to alter because I wanted it simple, clean, and mine. My bouquet was on the table. The photographer was outside the door. My fiancé, Caleb, was already waiting at the front of the garden chapel. And my phone was vibrating in my hand. Veronica. I almost did not answer. Then I remembered every family lesson I had ever been taught. Be polite. Be understanding. Do not make things worse. So I answered. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. Elena, she said, Dad isn't coming to get you. For a moment, the room went so quiet I could hear the zipper teeth on my dress pressing against my back. What? She sighed. He's with me. I had a panic attack. I told him I needed him more. There it was. The sentence that had shaped my whole life. She needed him more. Which meant I was expected to need less. My name is Elena Marlowe. I am 32 years old. I am a school counselor. I spend my life teaching children that love should not be earned through silence. But on my wedding day, I learned I had spent too many years forgetting to teach that lesson to myself. In the Marlowe family, peace was never peace. It was simply the name my mother gave to the silence required after Veronica hurt someone. My older sister was beautiful, dramatic, and allergic to being ignored. When we were children, if Veronica cried, the room changed shape. Dinner paused. Vacations shifted. Birthdays bent. Apologies were delivered to her even when she had started the damage. My father, Graham Marlowe, loved to call himself a practical man. What that meant was simple. He soothed whoever made the most noise. My mother, Elaine, called that keeping the family together. I called it learning to disappear. If Veronica screamed because I won an academic award, I was told to let her hold the certificate for the photo. If she cried because I got into my first-choice college, my father spent the evening comforting her about feeling left behind. If she ruined my graduation dinner by accusing me of thinking I was better than everyone, my mother pulled me aside and whispered, "Please, Elena, just let today be easy." Easy for whom? I wanted to ask that for 20 years. But good daughters in our house did not ask questions that made adults look at their own cowardice. Good daughters smiled. Good daughters understood. Good daughters swallowed disappointment before it became inconvenient. There was one person who never asked me to shrink. Her name was Miriam Clark. She had been my elementary school principal, then my mentor, then the closest thing to a steady parent I had ever known. Miriam saw me before I learned how invisible I had become. When I was 10, she found me crying behind the library after my father missed the student leadership ceremony. Veronica had sprained her wrist in gym class. Not badly, but loudly. My father went to her. Miriam sat beside me on the carpet and said, "A child should never have to pretend an empty chair is normal." I remember that sentence more clearly than the award. Because it was the first time an adult named the thing everyone else had trained me to decorate. Over the years, Miriam came to the concerts my father forgot. The scholarship dinner my mother said was too far. The first day I started my graduate internship as a school counselor, she was not dramatic. She was consistent. And consistency, when you grow up around emotional weather, feels like shelter. When Caleb proposed, Miriam was the first person I called after my parents. She cried quietly and said, "I hope this wedding feels like the beginning of a home where nobody has to compete for love." I wanted that so badly it hurt. Caleb Reeves was a firefighter. He understood emergencies, but he did not create them. That may sound like a small thing. To me, it was revolutionary. He did not punish silence or reward chaos. He listened when I needed time to answer. He noticed when I apologized for things that were not my fault. Early in our relationship, after one family dinner where Veronica turned my promotion into a discussion about how lonely she felt, Caleb drove me home and said, "Your family calls it peace when you absorb the impact." I stared out the car window. No one had ever said it that clearly. He reached for my hand. "You don't have to do that with me." That was how love began to feel different. Not louder. Safer. When we planned the wedding, I tried to keep it simple. Small garden ceremony. Close friends. Family. A dinner reception under string lights. Veronica, unfortunately, was a professional wedding stylist. She offered to help. I said no. That was the first boundary. And from the look on her face, it was also the first crime. Veronica began attacking the wedding in small, elegant ways. She told my mother that my colors were safe. She told my father that Caleb's family seemed intense. She told relatives that I had become controlling. Then she called me one night and said, "You know weddings are emotional for single people too." I said, "I know, but my wedding is not an apology for your feelings." The silence on the line was almost beautiful. Then she laughed. "You've changed." I had. That was the problem. Family systems do not fear your pain. They fear your recovery. My mother called the next morning. "She feels left out," she said. "She is invited." "She wanted to be involved." I wanted a peaceful wedding. My mother sighed in that exhausted way that used to make me feel guilty. "Why can't you just let her do one thing?" Because one thing had never been one thing. One thing was always the first hook in a net. The morning of my wedding was strangely calm. Rain had passed during the night, leaving the garden bright and clean. My dress hung from the wardrobe door. My shoes waited beside a vase of white lisianthus. Miriam arrived early with tea and a sewing kit. She kissed my forehead and said, "Look at you." No performance. No ownership. Just wonder. For a while, I believed the day might stay whole. My father had promised he would come to the bridal suite 10 minutes before the ceremony. He said he wanted to walk me down the aisle. I had hesitated before saying yes. Part of me wanted Miriam from the beginning. But part of me still wanted the father I had spent my life waiting for. Hope can be embarrassing that way. It keeps returning to empty chairs with flowers in its hands. At 3:55, the coordinator knocked. 5 minutes. At 3:56, my phone rang. Veronica. After she told me Dad was with her, I did not cry immediately. My body went cold first, then numb, then very, very awake. I asked, "Where is he?" "In the east hallway," she said. "He's calming me down." "Why did you call me?" She paused. Because cruelty likes to admire itself before speaking. I thought you should know before you stood there waiting. There it was. She wanted me abandoned before witnesses. She wanted the old Elena. The one who would fold the pain neatly and say, "It's okay." I looked at myself in the mirror. White dress, steady mouth, eyes that looked like they belonged to someone finally arriving. Then Miriam entered the room. She saw my face and did not ask useless questions. "Where is he?" she said. I told her. Her expression changed, not into surprise, but recognition. The kind of look you give a storm you warned someone about for years. Then she said, "You do not have to chase him." That sentence saved my wedding. I walked out of the bridal suite with Miriam at my side. Not down the aisle yet. Into the hallway. Veronica stood near the tall windows in a pale blue dress she had chosen because it looked almost white in photographs. My father stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. My mother hovered nearby, holding a tissue she did not need. When they saw me, everyone froze. I remember the light on the floor. I remember the smell of lilies. I remember thinking, this is the last time I will audition for a family that keeps changing the role. My father stepped forward. "Elena, honey, I was just about to come." I looked at Veronica. She was crying without tears. A talent she had perfected before middle school. "I needed him," she said. I nodded. "Yes, that has always been the rule." My mother whispered, "Not now." I turned to her. "Yes, now." My father looked wounded. That almost worked on me. Old training is powerful. It tells you a parent's shame is your emergency. He said, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I said, "But you plan to let me stand there wondering?" His mouth opened, closed. Veronica said, "This is exactly why I was upset. You always make things about you." I almost laughed. On my wedding day, in my wedding dress, 5 minutes before my ceremony. Still, somehow, I was making things about me. Caleb appeared at the end of the hallway then. Someone must have told him. He did not rush in like a hero from a movie. He walked steadily, eyes on me. "Are you okay?" he asked. No demand. No embarrassment. No concern for the schedule before my heart. I said, "I will be." Then I looked at my father. You cannot perform fatherhood at the last minute because people are watching. The hallway went silent. My father's face changed. For the first time, he looked less like a man accused and more like a man who had heard himself named accurately. "Elena," he said, "please, let me walk you. Don't do this in front of everyone." There it was again. Not, "Don't hurt me. Don't let them see." I felt sad then. Deeply sad. Because there is a grief that comes when you stop waiting for someone and realize how long you waited. I said, "You are not walking me today." My mother gasped. Veronica's face sharpened. My father looked at Miriam. Then at me. "Miriam," he said, as if her name was an insult. I took Miriam's hand. "Yes." "She showed up when no one was watching," I said. "That is the difference." Miriam squeezed my hand once. Caleb stepped beside me and looked at my family. "This ceremony is about our future," he said. "It is not a stage for Veronica's fear." For once, nobody had an answer ready. I walked down the aisle with Miriam Clark. Not because I wanted to punish my father, but because I wanted the aisle to tell the truth. Every guest stood. The music began. My bouquet trembled in my hand, but my steps did not. Halfway down, I saw my father near the back row. His face had collapsed. For once, I did not move toward his pain. I kept walking toward Caleb. When Miriam placed my hand in his, she did not say a word. She did not need to. Her presence had already spoken for decades. During the vows, I cried. Not because the ceremony was ruined. Because it was honest. Caleb promised to meet me in truth. I promised to stop calling endurance love. Some guests shifted when I said that. Good. Sometimes a wedding vow should make the old family system uncomfortable. When we kissed, the applause sounded like rain breaking a drought. At the reception, Veronica tried to recover control. Of course she did. People who build identity on attention cannot tolerate a room moving on without them. She cornered vendors first, then relatives, Then 2 wedding planners she knew professionally. She told them I had humiliated my father. She said I had replaced him for drama. She said Miriam had manipulated me. The problem was, people had seen the hallway. Not all of it. Enough. They had seen my father arrive late. They had seen Veronica crying in the East Hall before the ceremony. They had heard her tell a cousin that the wedding was too much Elena. And the wedding industry is smaller than people think. By the time dinner was served, 2 venue managers, a photographer, and 3 planners had quietly decided they would never refer Veronica again. It was not revenge. It was reputation meeting reality. When she realized the room was not turning toward her, she came for me. I was standing near the dessert table with Caleb when Veronica approached. Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile was not. "You must be so proud," she said. I looked at her calmly. "I am." That startled her more than anger would have. She lowered her voice. "You made Dad cry." I said, "Dad made a choice." "You punished him." "No, I stopped protecting him from the meaning of his choice." Her eyes flashed. "You think you're better than us now?" There it was. The old accusation. The one meant to drag me back into apology. I said, "No, I think I'm done being smaller than you need me to be." Caleb moved closer, not in front of me, but beside me. That mattered. He did not take my voice. He stood where my voice was safe. The venue manager asked Veronica to leave after she raised her voice near the dance floor. She left in a storm of perfume and humiliation. For once, I did not follow the storm. Later that night, my parents asked to speak with me. I almost said no. Then I decided I did not want another decade of unfinished sentences. We stood under the string lights behind the reception tent. The music was soft inside. My father looked older. My mother looked scared. He said, "I failed you today." I waited. He swallowed. "I have failed you before today, too." That sentence landed somewhere in me I had kept locked. But pain does not disappear because truth arrives late. My mother started crying. I thought keeping peace was best. I said, "Peace that depends on the hurt person staying quiet is not peace. It is permission." She flinched. Good. Some truths should disturb the people who avoided them. My father asked, "What happens now?" I looked through the tent opening at Caleb laughing with his crew from the fire station. Then I looked at Miriam, talking to one of my students' parents near the coffee table. I said, "Now relationships are earned by respect, not assumed through blood." The weeks after the wedding were quieter than I expected. Veronica lost clients. Not all at once. But enough. A bridal stylist survives on trust, and she had exposed herself as someone who could turn another woman's wedding into a stage for envy. She sent me one long email. It began with how hurt she was. It continued with how misunderstood she was. It ended with how I should have protected her feelings because she was my sister. I did not answer. Not every message deserves access. My parents entered therapy. I did not attend with them. That was their work. Mine was building a marriage where I did not smuggle old fear into new rooms. Some nights, I still woke up angry. Not only about the wedding. About the award ceremony, the graduations, the dinners, the years I had thought love meant being low maintenance enough not to lose. Caleb would sit with me in the dark and let the anger pass through without trying to tidy it. That too was love. Not fixing. Staying. A year later, Miriam and I visited the school where I worked. I was leading a group session for students who struggled with family conflict. One girl asked, "What if keeping peace means letting someone hurt you?" I looked at her and saw every version of myself I had spent years trying to save. I said, "Then it is not peace. It is training, and you are allowed to stop being trained." Afterward, Miriam squeezed my shoulder. "You finally sound like yourself," she said. I smiled. I think I finally know who that is. Our wedding photo hangs in our hallway now. In it, Miriam is walking beside me. Caleb is waiting ahead with tears in his eyes. My father is visible near the back row if you know where to look. I do not hide that. The photo tells the truth. Some people arrive late. Some people arrive consistently. And sometimes the most important walk of your life is not toward tradition. It is away from the lie that tradition is enough. The thing no one tells you about finally setting a boundary is that it does not feel powerful at first. It feels lonely. After the reception, after the last guest left, after Caleb and I drove away under a tunnel of sparklers, I sat in the passenger seat with my veil folded in my lap and shook. Caleb pulled over before we reached the hotel. He did not ask me to calm down. He did not say the day was still beautiful, even though it was. He simply turned off the engine and held my hand while I cried for the child who had learned to expect abandonment so politely. I cried for the little girl behind the library, for the teenager standing beside a birthday cake, while Veronica locked herself in the bathroom because the attention was not on her. For the graduate who accepted a late text from her father, as if it were the same thing as his presence. For the woman in the white dress who had almost let a man who chose the hallway walk her into a new life. Caleb said, "I'm sorry they made you fight for what should have been easy." That sentence stayed with me more than any toast that night. Because he did not say he was sorry the wedding was dramatic. He said he was sorry love had been made difficult for me. The next morning, my phone was full of messages. Some were kind. Some were curious. Some were the kind of messages relatives send when they want details without responsibility. My mother wrote, "Please call me. Your father is devastated." Veronica wrote nothing. That was how I knew she was planning a better wound. 3 days later, she posted a carefully worded message online about being erased from a family milestone by someone who used a wedding to punish childhood pain. She did not name me. She did not need to. By noon, I had received 6 screenshots. By evening, one of her industry contacts had commented publicly, "Veronica, I was there. This is not what happened." That was the beginning of the second collapse. Not loud. Not cinematic. Just the slow sound of people refusing to carry her version anymore. For years, Veronica had survived because everyone around her privately knew the truth and publicly protected the lie. The wedding changed that. It moved the family pattern into a room full of witnesses. And once witnesses exist, denial becomes harder to sell. At work, the story followed me in fragments. A teacher asked if I was okay. A parent squeezed my arm and said, "My sister did something like that at my baby shower." One student, a quiet boy whose older brother dominated every parent meeting, stayed after group and asked, "What if the loud one is always believed?" I said, "Then the quiet one starts keeping records inside themselves, but one day they are allowed to speak." He nodded as if I had handed him a map. That was when I understood the wedding had become more than a family rupture. It had become part of my work. Not because I wanted to turn my pain into a lesson for everyone else, but because some lessons cost too much to keep private. My father asked to meet me alone 6 weeks after the wedding. I chose a public cafe. Old Elena would have gone to his house, sat at his kitchen table, and made it easy for him to feel like a good man trying hard. New Elena chose neutral ground. He arrived early. He looked thinner. He had printed a letter and folded it twice. "I wrote this because I didn't trust myself to say it right," he said. I did not reach for it immediately. "Read it," I said. His hands shook. Then he began. He admitted he had used my steadiness as permission to neglect me. He admitted he had confused Veronica's volume with need and my silence with resilience. He admitted the wedding was not the first time he chose the easier child to comfort, and the easier child was never me. I listened. I let the words land. And then I said the hardest thing I had ever said to him. "I believe you are sorry. I do not yet believe you are safe." He flinched. But he did not argue. That was the first small evidence of change. I told him safety would not be rebuilt through speeches. It would be rebuilt through behavior. Showing up when promised. Refusing Veronica's manipulation without asking me to manage the aftermath. Telling my mother the truth before asking me for forgiveness. He nodded. For the first time, I did not feel responsible for whether he succeeded. That was freedom too. For a few weeks after the wedding, I still reached for old guilt. I would remember my father's face in the back row and wonder whether I had been cruel. Then I would remember the hallway. I would remember Veronica saying she needed him more. I would remember my mother asking me, even in my wedding dress, to make the pain convenient. And I would remind myself that telling the truth is not cruelty. Cruelty was asking me to pretend abandonment was love. Caleb never rushed my healing. He let me grieve the father I wanted while protecting the life we were building. Miriam told me, "You did not lose your family at the aisle. You stopped losing yourself." That became the sentence I carried into my new marriage. Not as anger, as freedom. People sometimes ask whether I regret not letting my father walk me down the aisle. No. I regret the years when I would have let him. I regret every time I mistook his conflict avoidance for gentleness. I regret every time I confused my mother's silence with wisdom. I regret every time I believed Veronica's pain was more real because it was louder. But I do not regret that day. That day, I chose truth over performance. I chose the woman who showed up over the man who wanted the photograph. I chose a husband who stood beside me instead of a family that expected me to kneel under the word peace. And most of all, I chose myself. Not selfishly. Finally, real love does not make you compete for a chair at the table. Real love shows up. It tells the truth. It protects your dignity when no one is watching. My wedding did not go according to plan. It went according to a revelation. And that revelation became the first honest blessing of my marriage.